ma Ferefugna elettronica.
What the?
What are you doing?
Like, oh my god.
I don't even know what's going on.
Player one. Prepare yourself.
Don't forget cards at RitaYanez.com, and so am I. Under your bed.
Turn on the light! Turn on the light!
Hi there, Cancer. This is your weekly reading for the week of December 14th through 20th. I hope you're doing very well and that you're feeling great and that your holiday season is off to a lovely start. I know this looks a little crazy at times here this week, but it's going to be just fine. This is more of what's going on a communicative and emotional level, that which I will help you understand, shall we? On Monday, we've got the 10 of Cups in reverse, and this could be feeling for you like your home and life is not as stable as you'd like it to be, maybe because like so many kids are kind of pulled around for the holidays to visit other families and to be sent to this parent and this in-law and that one. And so if that's the case, just don't let it get under your skin too much. If you do have a situation that is particularly upsetting for you, that you don't like, just an example, not picking on anybody for any reason, but you have to go visit your dad and his girlfriend is a bitch, and you have to go over there, and worse, you get flown there and you're stuck there, and it's not like you can just turn around and come home. You're at the mercy of the powers that be. Well, this could be a good time since it's probably getting so late that not much can be adjusted. If you do have time to communicate, I'll teach you which days and how to ameliorate some of the more bumpy aspects, but to work within the ones that could help you. I will show you that. But maybe you could actually put it in the form of a document where maybe in Microsoft Word, whatever word processing program you use, but most people it's Word or, the notepad, but you put down maybe your ideas of how this would work better for you. Maybe if you really do have to get flown every Christmas to go see that other parent, maybe you could say, well, how about every other Christmas? I want to spend one calm Christmas at home and then go ahead and ship me off. But how about when you do, I don't want to stay there that long. And maybe you can keep from adding the inflammatory statements like, dad's girlfriend is a flaming bitch. Then maybe you could just say, you can ask me questions about why. And you could say, I find the environment toxic. It's not about my dad. It's extraneous influences. And then that way you can try to save yourself from having your mom get pissed off, pick up the phone, call your dad and say, why is she a bitch? Why is this difficult? Why is it hateful there? And then all of a sudden it's like World War III. And maybe your parents' divorce is like the War of the Roses and they can't just stop. They can't just, and maybe your mom's just fine or your dad's just fine and it's the other parent who's being difficult. My kids have experienced that themselves and it was difficult until it finally just all stopped, which took like superhuman conditions for that to change. But this is where you might be able to put into some kind of communique why you feel the way you do and how you could help solve the problem. Because what's really hard for parents is when their kids are having the problem, they start to stress out naturally because we're trying to keep you guys safe and happy and healthy. But at the same time, there are certain rules that because of what the legal system does to protect both parents' interests and both children's interests, that, meaning from both the parents and that everything is as kosher as possible, sometimes it, of course, doesn't have room for why something is particularly uncomfortable but not dangerous or horrible, although, there is room to say that some situations are just psychologically not healthy for children or emotionally not healthy. And, that's a great big ball of wax that has to be worked with by somebody else who's closer to your situation. But I'm trying to give you the idea that if this is what's creeping up on you, if this is where it's going to bother you, that maybe being proactive could be like typing it all out, getting it all ready to edit. And then when you're about ready, you're going to put it in an envelope and say, let's just use your mom as the example. Mom, I want to express to you how I feel about this visitation thing, but I don't want to stress you out. So here it is. I'm going to put it on top of the refrigerator, or I'm going to put it, with a magnet on the refrigerator door. But don't read it unless you are calm. I don't want to upset you. Give your parent the moment to almost get ready for it. I could tell you that even with my own children, believe it or not, with my first husband, who was nuts, it was easier than it was with my second. And when I did have problems with the first husband, it was because of the second, the one I thought would never do it. So my kids naturally would come back. And since I was ventable, you could vent on me, I would hear it all. And my heart would just be breaking into pieces because I couldn't really control what was happening until things were different when they were older and could be heard, and when, of course, other people created such situations that they could actually have their say, their day. So just remember who you're giving it to. Remember whose hands it could end up in. You shouldn't be intimidated to talk to a family member like your mom or dad, but, sometimes that's the case. And I think that active kind of instability, where I believe that it will form and shape your character to be a very strong and sensitive individual, it is no denying that this is kind of stressful crap, okay? It's not easy for anybody, not the parents, not you, sure as heck not you. So remember that the sun in Sagittarius is squaring Jupiter and Virgo here. So the sun in Sagittarius is your solar sixth house of your routine and what you do every day. Maybe you've got a precious pet that you don't want to leave. You're like, I'm not leaving my cat, Jacob. I am not leaving my dog, Finch. It could be real to you that you're really experiencing this, and I understand. You could ask to have the pet transported with you, but that's an extra cost. And then there has to be some protocols in place. So if you live closer, it's not so bad because the dog could go with, but if we're talking like an 85-pound Labrador and, your dad's girlfriend is that one crazy person who's allergic to every damn thing and doesn't want to make it easier for you, you could imagine how this could be difficult. Or if verifiably they don't have a yard, they live in an apartment, and so that could happen. We just have a lot that we could really say about it because it is actively happening in your solar success. So there's something about the routine that is somewhat surprising every time it comes around. You're like, and each time it's crazier because, Rita, I don't know if I'm coming or going, if they're picking me up or if I'm flying or if this is happening. When can I go home? Oh, geez. You're going through all of that, and I totally hear you on it. Your solar third house of Virgo is where Jupiter is. And so that's why I'm saying try to mitigate things by putting your thoughts into a document where it doesn't have the tendency to come out like when we start talking, and let's say you're going to have a moment and you're just going to start crying, and girl or boy, it doesn't matter. You just start blurting it all out because you're like up to here. Well, if you put it in a piece of paper, it's somewhat more controlled. It's better than putting it in a text message because sometimes we say shit and we're like, damn, I can't retract it now. It's out there, at least with a letter, before you actually magnetize it to the refrigerator or whatever, you've had a chance to look at it and maybe edit it and maybe revise it, but definitely go over it a few times. Or if you have a very close friend who loves you and would hear you on this, that you could say, okay, what do you get from this? When I read this to you and I'm implying different situations, what do you infer? What do you hear? And they could give you some feedback that might help you. As long as you don't allow yourself to get too oversensitive, you'll be okay. Mercury in Capricorn sextiling Neptune in Pisces. That is, again, some kind of a consideration that has to do with the marriage, the divorce, the partnership, the way it works, the way it isn't working. And it could very well be along the lines of your parents or your former parents, or even if they weren't married, but that whole jazz. Well, that could be. And look, there are people in the world that got babies from multiple people, and it's crazy because they're only 20 years old and they got 4 kids, and it's like, what the, but they of course have more complex dynamics in that they're children with children. And so you could imagine that if your parents are younger because they had you when they were very young, and that throws a whole other curve into the game. And so remember that there could be some different and additional dynamics happening in there, a marriage or divorce or partnership or former partnership that could be somewhat sensitized. And there could be a legal issue here where you're like, I don't even want to go. And then, your parent is like, but by law, I have to, because if I don't, I'm busted too. And so, maybe it will require some multiple discussions over time, but maybe a year in advance where this is the last year you do this. And then you are told, look, I am not going to do it next year, or I can't do it this way. I need your help. We need counseling. We need something, because I can't keep doing it this way. You have every right to speak up for yourself, especially if you're able to corroborate your feelings with situations that make sense. Not just like, I can't go because I won't leave my boyfriend. Like, you're not going to get hurt. I would make sure don't even say that, because it's just going to throw in another dynamic that may not even be what you want to talk about. And with Mars and Libra, your fourth house up there in the home, there could be some angry responses, or you could lose your temper and then they could be pissed at you further. Where it's like, oh, geez, what angle do I not get hit from? So on Tuesday, we've got the High Priestess in reverse. And again, this could be that energy of somebody who is either abusing their position as a woman in a position of authority. I suppose it could be an extremely effeminate male, but for the most part, you're going to see that this is either a woman or the energy related to a woman, or a person's ability or inability to use or abuse their psychic intuition. Again, if you have a situation here where you're somewhat manipulating a situation emotionally because you don't want a relationship to end, or you don't want something to go a certain way, don't get involved in manipulating other people. I say come right out with it and tell them exactly what you want to do. Look, I'm about to hypnotize you to stare into my eyes and promise to marry me for never and never. That's different, because at least if you put it out there like a disclaimer, they know what they're dealing with. But this could also indicate that a woman in a position of authority is somewhat abusive in her effect, that she is taking advantage of her position, or that she is manipulating somebody else to get the effect that she wants. Again, that Mars and Libra there that is challenged by Uranus and Aries in the 10th house could make it somewhat of a public situation. So hopefully everybody behaves themselves, especially the adults. Kind of what excuse do they have? It takes a lot to piss me off. But let me tell you, I have been pissed off before to the point where I thought I would kill a person, just so angry. Of course, I'd never physically do it, but, where you're just like, that's it. You can't even see anymore. It's a blind rage and you're super pissed off. That's what we're hoping doesn't escalate. With you guys, it would be much more emotional, or you might start crying after you have an outburst. But with the adults, they could start getting really ugly with each other, because they may be at their breaking point as well. Seven of Pentacles could be that breaking point, because this is a card that denotes a sort of frustration with waiting and waiting for a situation to be different, or to get easier, for the kids to be happier. Why can't we just all get along? Or your dad finally, I'm up to here because he is an ass. And you're like, wow. But it could be that that person gets to that point. That's why I think that the element of letting your parents or parent or whomever it is that you're trying to communicate your feelings with, that you allow them to kind of choose it, because you don't know if your mom's back hurts. You don't know if your dad has a hemorrhoid. You don't know if your grandma is sick and has to go to the emergency room and everybody's tired and you didn't notice because you were sleeping like a baby with your cat Finch or your dog Jacob or Barney, so you slept like a baby and you don't know why they're so tired. Or maybe they had a really crappy day at work, or they're having a hard time getting that money to stretch. And maybe they really are overcommitted at work and you know that, but I wouldn't tell them that, because it could be the thing that becomes the straw on the camel's back, whatever that means, which is just proverbially speaking, the thing that just finally just dumps the whole load on the ground. Thursday, we've got the Three of Swords here, and there could be this love triangle or a parenting triangle. It doesn't necessarily have to be a love triangle in your life, but it could be that your mom is single, your dad has the girlfriend, there's the three of them, people aren't getting along, the girlfriend is a jealous wretch, the mom is feeling insecure and emotional, dad is just trying to make everybody happy, but there aren't enough presents in the world to soothe a broken or ailing heart. Truly. And so this is where Venus and Scorpio sextiling Pluto and Capricorn could also help you get your communications across, but be very careful, because it could also be the same opportunity to make things better could actually make things worse. And I think that's more apt when we're younger, because we don't have the experience that somebody who's 80 years old has. Okay, they may have been there, done that. We're still trying to figure out where the hell is there. We're just trying to get from point A to point B without losing a shoe. You know what I'm saying? So just be careful about the way that you communicate. So if you feel that the situation is, if in your gut, you can tell that it's just going to get worse if you even say a word, don't say the word. It might be better just tabled to a better time when you see that your mom or somebody is in a better mood, or whoever it is. Maybe it's a best friend of yours that you have to have a communication with. You're like, dude, you dog me all the time. and you hurt my feelings. And maybe the best time wouldn't be right there in public when everybody's watching because, she could lose a screw. So Friday, we've got the Four of Swords here in reverse, which is an indication that you feel like you can finally get back on your horse. You know what they say, once you fall off your horse, the first thing you got to do, get back on, because if not, you will be afraid of that damn thing for the rest of your life. And of course, that's just some kind of a colloquialism, but it is basically saying that sometimes even when we are hurt, and I do know that that's the case because with the Three of Swords and then the subsequent four, we know that there's a progression, but at least it's moving in the right direction. So get back on your horse and, don't let there be any hitches in your giddy up. Just keep moving forward. The Sun in Sagittarius squaring the North Node in Virgo is again talking about that daily routine house with your third house communication. I have no doubt that maybe you want to do things your own way and that it ties in somehow to communicating your feelings and that you may not be heard. Venus in Scorpio will quincunx, which is an inconjunct aspect to Uranus. And Aries is just talking about the idea that maybe there is a relationship that you are trying to not let other people know how much you want to be with this person, because if you say too much, then you'll be damn sure that they're going to guarantee your butt is flown somewhere, maybe to Haiti, just to get you away to go do your thing, because now they're not listening. So don't inject your personal emotional state or your affection toward people. It's not about lying. It's just like, don't say too much truth, because in your excitement about the romantic potential, you could also be alerting parents that they got to put you on further lockdown. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't sneak around, don't crawl out of windows, because the worst thing that could happen is probably the thing that usually happens when people get murdered on the side of a road, and then it's game over for sure, right? So just remember that. Temper what you say with some realism, okay? If you say, but I love him, we're going to get married and put your baby carriage in, 5 kids, a Volvo, and 2.5 dogs, and it's great. And I'm going to be a chef. And your mom's like, what? Hello? It might not be exactly what she wants to hear at this time. Remember, keep some of those dreams to yourself, because it isn't that you're trying to verbalize them to justify them. You're verbalizing them because you're excited and you're happy about life. And these are the wonderful times, the years when things are new and sparkly and, you're not all tarnished like an old piece of silver. And not everybody really can understand this, because as parents, we become more prone to detecting where is the risk. They're thinking, oh my God, this person could end up, engaging in inappropriate sex. They get pregnant, the world, then we've got bigger issues. And so they're, of course, just trying to make sure that you safely go off to college. So don't say things that are going to cause you problems. And again, I'm the type of person that's not going to encourage or condone in any way underage relations, because I feel like if you're not old enough to vote, you wouldn't know what to do if you did end up pregnant and or got somebody pregnant. And I'm not saying that I don't understand that you know how to take care of yourself. It's just that I'm telling you, remember that when you get older, you see these things in hindsight and you're like, oh my God, no. Look, I've got 3 sons. The oldest is 22, the youngest is 15, and these people ain't nobody even getting married until they're in their 30s, okay? So there's no conversation with babies going to happen around this part of my world until they're all in their 40s. That's it, bottom line. Because getting, advanced degrees and everything takes a lot of time and dedication, and you probably need more help doing your laundry than you do changing diapers on a baby. So just keep it in perspective when your parents are like freaked out. They don't want anything to happen to you. And I lecture people all the time when they bring something to me and I've got a real opportunity to say something. It'll be like, what the hell are you doing gone all the time working, though you don't need it, and your daughter is running around loose, could end up pregnant because you know what's going on, or you're turning a blind eye. You watch your kids, you help them, you keep them busy, throw them into cheer, throw them into basket weaving. I don't care, but you gotta, so the parents, they don't always know how to raise you, let me assure you. And so then you are almost up against your own devices on how to protect yourself. And then there again, you don't always have enough information because you can't really talk to anybody in your family. So you end up talking to your peers, and what do they know? They probably only have as much experience as you do, and they might not even be as emotionally adept as you're becoming. So remember what I'm telling you, that it's not because they hate you, it's because they love you. But no, not all parents know how, they don't know how to effectively coach their own children. So the Ace of Cups here is a card that indicates a spiritual renewal, that you're feeling better, even though you seem to have gone through some difficulties this week. And that last quarter moon there on Friday is actually speaking to making us feel a little bit uncomfortable, because it's in a sensitive place in Pisces, where we still have, Chiron is still sitting there, and even though direct, it's still sensitive. And also Mercury will conjunct Pluto in Capricorn. And so, of course, we've got this, again, this energy of trying to communicate things that are on some kind of a partnering level. And when Mercury and Pluto are conjunct each other this way, they're almost like forcing communications that inevitably, even if they're horrific, will bring up for dissemination or review or whatever adjustment needs to take place. So, it could be some very deep information that comes up as course in terms of this Ace of Cups type of renewal. It does, of course, speak of the emotional, but the emotions don't usually get discussed until they are spoken about. So that's that part of the energy where I'm saying be careful what you say because other people are listening. So you better mean what you say and be very certain about the words that you choose. On Sunday, the Five of Cups in reverse is great because it lets me know that you are actively understanding that even if you can't change things now, in the future, you will be able to make decisions that are more relevant to your choices and your belief systems and what your desires and what your aspirations are. Look, because eventually you can choose which college you're going to go to and you can choose how many years you're going to stay at university. You can choose what you're going to do with your major. All of that comes with age. And so, of course, it's just around the corner. And if you don't believe me, because trust me, I've been in your shoes where I feel like this will never end. Just the teenage years are never going to end. I just want to be an adult already, or so I thought. Trust me, in a blink of an eye, it's already there for you. Uranus, again, in Aries, squaring Pluto and Capricorn is somewhat a volatile kind of aspect. So we got to make sure that, we don't have public meltdowns or encourage them in any way. Look, if your mother says you can't have that pair of shoes, be like, okay, may the force be with you and also with you. Just like let it go. You're going to notice again this Mercury retrograde shadow on about the 19th, which is when we've got it going into that pre-shadow, but definitely keep your receipts. Make sure that you know where you're going. Make sure you know where your purse, your phone, your cell phone, your wallet, whatever it is that you've got that you got to keep track of because we start to lose crap right about then. Venus trining Chiron and Pisces. So Venus and Scorpio in the 5th house, trining Chiron and Pisces at 9th house could help you communicate things or maybe even smooth over some rifts between family members, your siblings most likely, and your early home environment would be the one that you live in most of the time. So there could be some smoothing over here, and maybe you do feel like you have something to apologize for and say, hey, look, I'm sorry I was so emo. I just have some things on my chest. I have nobody to talk to, and so I wish I could talk to you. So if you ever think you have time to talk to me, that'll guilt trip your parents into talking to you. They need to know. If I've noticed something about cancers. And I've said it before, so I want you to remember this so that in the future you don't do this either. I've noticed that Cancer parents are very good with everybody else's children, but then they're either totally non-existent with their own or they go overboard and they're horrible to their own. So I'm not saying that there aren't normal Cancerian parents out there, but I want you to remember this, that you are much more better equipped to raise your children one day when you're in your 30s, 40s, whatever, and that you'll be able to understand where they're coming from better because you're going to remember what I'm telling you, that just because other people's kids are great or whatever, Cancer parents need to pay more attention to their children at home, to take them seriously, to treat them lovingly, and to be there for them no matter how crazy the situation is. I know of one particular family where they were just the most outrageous example of this, and I watched both Cancer parents do this to their Cancer daughter, and I think they even had a son who was a Cancer rising. I'm like, what the hell? All of these people here, it was almost like that was an inevitability that these people would have been able to help each other because the children were not at fault, really. The parents were the ones that were both at the greatest detriment to their children, and it was sad. There was really nothing I could do, and what I should have done is just basically walked away from this one individual who had not been honest from the beginning. But what really bothered me is that I started noticing the same types of interactions with my children while he was with them. And I thought, oh shit, if there wasn't a clearer way to make an example of what I'm talking about, that means that you are going to be far better parents, Cancer, when you guys go to raise your own children, because you're going to remember what I'm telling you. You got to pay attention and be sensitive with your own sensitive kids, especially if they're Cancer types.
Game.